Dr. Wendie Trubow. Welcome to the Pain and Performance Podcast.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me here. Call me Wendie.
Wendie. I'm very excited to have this. Like I was telling you before we started, we put out kind of like, hey, we have Dr. Wendie coming on. What questions would y'all have? And we got like a barrage of people saying, I've thought that I was having issues with this. And I really want to know more about how toxins can affect my health. How can they be getting in? What symptoms could they be causing? So I think we'll be able to give people a lot of help, a lot of guidance with this conversation. So thanks for coming on. Why don't you tell us a little bit about how you kind of transitioned into this focus?
Okay, well, I mean, my mess became my message. It's totally personal. I went through it and didn't want anyone else to go through what I went through. I mean, that's the short answer, but I think, I'm a child of the 70s, and so we ate sloppy joes and taco night and casseroles, and that wasn't terrible except for the sloppy joe part of it. But in my early years, I had lots of ear infections, strep throat. I had pneumonia when I was 6 months old. So by the time I was 10, I had had countless antibiotic courses. Okay. Then in my teens, I had irritable bowel, but I didn't know that. I just knew that there were some foods that when I ate them, I got sick. It was oranges, peppers, and garlic. I couldn't eat them. It made me sick. So I didn't eat them for like 30 years. And in my 20s, I got real irritable bowel, like terrible gas and bloating and diarrhea. And I didn't, nobody talked about this stuff in the 80s and 90s. So I just thought this was how life went. And then fast forward, I'm 35. I've just had my second kid. And I only get out of bed because I have to. I'm the primary breadwinner. And I had head to toe issues. So I had hair loss, brain fog, thyroid dysfunction, anxiety, heart palpitations, asthma, bloating, gas, diarrhea, constipation, sometimes on the same day. Pick your poison, right?
Right.
I was extremely thin, nutrient deficiencies, and my feet hurt. It was kind of weird. Like when I got out of bed in the morning, I had to walk it off because I hurt. And I went to my husband's functional medicine doctor, and I went to his mentor. And he did this massive workup and diagnosed me ultimately with celiac, a whole range of nutrient deficiencies, and gut dysfunction and candida. And that was my entry into functional medicine, was as a patient. And I was at the time practicing as an OBGYN in a just straight up traditional OBGYN role. So I delivered babies and did surgery. So when I got this diagnosis, I started to work on my gut health. I went gluten-free, worked on replacing my minerals and nutrients. I did a bone density scan because celiacs often have bone loss, and I didn't have bone loss. That was good. And after a few years, I was like, I really need to do this for people because there's a lot of surgeons with good hands, but there's not a lot of people doing functional medicine. So I left my traditional practice. I left my paid job for my unpaid job, essentially, in 2009.
This might be kind of a little bit of an aside, but do you remember when you were like, I'm going to actually take the leap and do this? Was there a case or was there something that kind of led to you actually making that change?
Yeah, it sounds kind of hokey, Derrick, okay? But it was 2008, actually. It was Thanksgiving weekend, and I woke up on the morning of my high school reunion, and I was going that night. So 2008 could that be 30 years? I'm really bad at this sort of on-the-spot math, but I think it was my 30-year high school reunion, and I was like, I woke up, and I said to my husband, I have to quit my job. I have to come do what you do. And he's like, okay. And he was not yet drawing a salary from the startup that we started. And he's like, okay, we'll figure it out. So I went to my high school reunion. I told everyone that I was quitting my job. Monday morning, I submit my resignation. And because in the medical insurance world, you have to give 3 months notice, I gave 3 months notice. So fast forward, that would be February of 2009. So I give my notice on Monday. Tuesday, I found out I was pregnant with my third child.
Oh my gosh.
Oh my God. That was kind of what I said. I was like, oh my God, except there were some, 4-letter expletives thrown in my thoughts there. I was like, I'm leaving my paid job for my unpaid job when my husband's not drawing a salary. And he's like, it's going to be okay. And it was, but it was kind of stressful at the beginning. But I really credit him, my son, because he was so grounded and chill. And that's the hokey part. Like, he was like a Buddha baby, and I'm like this motor mouth, right? And with him, I got quieter and more introspective and was able to recognize like I was in the wrong job. and I gave notice. So it's pretty cool.
I love it. Yeah, I mean, it's always like, I think most of the people we talk to who just have a wonderful way of improving other people's health and life have an empathy that comes from like experiencing it, on some level. And I think that gives us a way of helping people that's a bit deeper than like just having the skills and the knowledge to do it. If you can connect with them and they feel that, I think people just have a better outcome knowing like, she knows me. She understands what I'm going through, and that's why she's doing this.
Mm-hmm. And I've been there. I mean, everything that I have my patients do, except for Lyme treatment, I never had Lyme. Oh, God, I have to knock on something. I never had Lyme, but I've had everything else, right? Like thyroid dysfunction, autoimmune disease, toxins, you name it. I've kind of checked that box. And so weight gain, hair loss, I've done it all. And so the things I do with my patients, like I've gone through this. We're in it together. I'm still in it, right? I'm not like I'm done.
Right.
Just improving.
So we talk a lot about how a lot of times our medical diagnosis, the things that the doctor tells you is the cause of your, pain or your health issue is actually the symptom. So, people will come back and they'll say, I have thyroid dysfunction. That's my diagnosis. And my question is always like, well, what is the thyroid dysfunction a symptom of? Mm-hmm. And you see this up and down. I mean, we treat pain. So somebody comes and says, I have a herniated disc. And the question is the same. What is that a symptom of? That's not your diagnosis. That's actually a symptom of something deeper going on in your body. How do you think about that when it comes to looking at people with thyroid dysfunction? I mean, like, even starting this, we went through, what you were experiencing. If you went to, just mainstream medical doctor, they'd have diagnosed you with, 6 or 7 different, disorders or dysfunctions or diseases.
Right. So I think of it like anything that you're suffering with is a manifestation of inflammation. And then the question is what's causing it. So you could tell me anything and I would say, okay, well, that's acting like a toxin for you, right? It's only what's happening for you that's pertinent. So for me, my initial toxin was gluten. Caused an autoimmune disease, but I had the genetics, I had the setup, I had the gut dysfunction to promote it and keep it walking along. So my major source of inflammation in my 30s was gluten. In my 40s, it was environmental toxins because I got exposed to lead after being in France for a week, right after Notre Dame burned. And got a lead exposure, and that sent me off the second cliff. It's like a camel's back, right? The first major hump was age 35 with the celiac, and then the second major hump was age 48 with the toxin. So all of those things that we have are just or simply a manifestation of inflammation leading to a symptom. So you don't get sick because it's just a nature of aging. You get sick because you've lived long enough to accumulate more stressors and toxins, and those lead to dysfunction, which ends up as a diagnosis. But you don't get sick just from being old. It's not the age. It's all the stuff you're getting exposed to in that time.
It's such a good point. We tell people, it's not the calendar or the clock that's counting. Yeah. I love that idea because I think it gives people more control, more kind of internal power than just saying like, oh, like I can't stop the clock, right?
Right.
No,
right.
You don't need to, because that's not where your problem's coming from. Your problem is coming from the accumulation of these other issues that just so happens to sometimes correlate with being around longer. Mm-hmm. So when you're working with
the more toxins you get.
Right.
Yeah. We're good when we're young because we don't have as many exposures. And then the longer you live, the more you get exposed. And guess what? They're fat soluble. They're stored in our body, in our fat, our bones, our organs, our brain. And we wonder why we have dysfunctions. Like, well, it's all these toxins are hanging out in us.
I know that like this is going to be a very broad question, but in terms of like the symptoms that somebody listening to this, if they've got some, kind of unexplained symptoms, what are the things that jump out to you when somebody's telling you some of their symptoms that you're like, that sounds very, very accurate in terms of that being toxin originated?
Yeah, great question. Okay, so here's the thing. Let's take a step back and say too much of a good thing can be bad, right? So you could use food in a way that's toxic to you. So if someone's doing everything right, meaning they eat in a way that their body likes, they move their body in a way that their body needs, they get enough sleep, so they're doing everything right, right? And they say to me, I'm tired, I can't lose weight, my gut is dysfunctional. The first thing I'll say is most areas of your body, I'm looking down at my body, most areas of your body should be invisible. You shouldn't notice your gut any more than you notice your elbow. It should be invisible to you and just happening. So whenever you're noticing a part of your body, that's the part that's showing up with symptoms. And so anyone who has anything, so let's go head to toe. Let's go first with symptoms and then we can go with diagnoses, or maybe the other way around. Either way is fine, right? So the symptoms of brain fog, hair loss, fatigue, difficulty breathing, shortness of breath, wheezing, bloating, gas, diarrhea, constipation, anxiety, depression, OCD, schizophrenia, weight loss, weight gain, frequent illnesses, skin disorders, pain in your body. Those are the symptoms. And then it's not a full list. It's just what's coming to my mind. And then there's the diagnoses of any type of autoimmune disease. So celiac is one, Hashimoto's is another, Graves' disease, multiple sclerosis, rheumatoid arthritis, so the more degenerative diseases, cancer, cardiometabolic disease, so that would include PCOS, prediabetes, metabolic syndrome, diabetes, type 2, cardiovascular disease, stroke, cancer, I think I mentioned, or Alzheimer's, dementia, Parkinson's disease. It's kind of anything. If you live on this earth, you're exposed to toxins and you start to eventually have symptoms.
So in that, because obviously you look at something like that and you're like, okay, this is, I think everybody listening to this would say like, okay, I'm having headaches, is that toxin related? I'm having, GI dysfunction. I'm having acid reflux. I'm having, skin issues. What's the process for them? Because what a lot of people will happen is that, they have these issues. They probably ignore it or change something slightly in their life. They go to their doctor puts them on a medication. It helps a little bit. And then they kind of just get stuck in this somewhat yo-yo. There's times where they flare up, they take the meds, they stop. What's the process of getting to the bottom of what is causing their symptoms? Like for you, you went functional med and had somebody who helped you through that. For somebody listening to this who's going through that, what do you take them through?
I do a very systematic, and actually all the providers, we have a brick and mortar and we have an online brand. So the brick and mortar is functional medicine. We take insurance, we have a membership practice, and everyone in our practice takes people through a systematic approach. So first we want your story. What's happening with you? What are you struggling with? Then we want to understand all the nuts and I say we're going to play 20 questions and understand, do you have allergies? Do you have any medications? What of your surgeries? Like your history, right?
Yeah.
And then we take them through a systematic approach. So the foundations of your health, that you can't step over this, is your food, your stress, your sleep, your movement, your relationship with yourself and others, your purpose in life, your connection and intimacy. So that we evaluate your mineral nutrient status, your food sensitivities, your gut health, your adrenals, and your antioxidants, as well as how are you moving your body, what's your relationship with others, what's your relationship with yourself, what's your purpose in life. Our business is called 5 Journeys because we're looking at, the whole of you, and there's 5 journeys you take to health: your physical, chemical, emotional, social, and spiritual health. And so when you put that together, that's you, right? So the evaluation includes blood work that's looking at minerals, nutrients. I said to a patient right before I met with you that I'm looking at what's torturing you now and what's putting you at risk for diabetes, heart disease, cancer, dementia, because not on my watch, right? We don't want that. We don't want to have you have all these diagnoses. We want it to quiet down. And so we're doing a stool evaluation because all disease starts in the gut. We're looking at your adrenal health, I mentioned your food sensitivities, and then your antioxidants, your B vitamins, your minerals, nutrients. So that's kind of the entry level workup. And then round 2, when you're You can't go anywhere until you fix the gut and food sensitivities. And then once you've addressed that, then we deal with toxins, which is heavy metals, mycotoxins. That's the toxins mold puts out when it's in your body. Very creepy. And the other, which is flame retardants, gasoline fumes, plastic, styrene, toluene, VOCs, nail polish, like it's a whole list of stuff. So we do this systematically because you can't really take away toxins until you've dealt with the foundations of your health.
Yeah, I think that's brilliant. The one question we get all the time is like, how does somebody test their environment for some of these things? What's a reliable way of doing that? Have y'all dug into that quite a bit?
Yeah, actually, you know how the cobbler's kids are never shod. So I actually said to my husband, it was almost a year ago at this point, like, we have to test our house. We have to test it. So we have a company near us, and I think they do some national work, but it's called Indoor Doctor, and they come out and they test your house for mold. They test for air quality. They test for, we have a gas stove, and he was like, well, you need a filter in your kitchen because your gas stove is putting out a lot of chemicals. And so you can absolutely test your house. I would not, this is not a DIY project though. I would have someone do it for you because it's just, this is really better left to an expert, but you can totally test for that stuff. And as a result, we found mold in our bathroom that we had no idea we had. We remediated it, and we found the air quality in certain areas of our house was different. So we helped those areas. Like it really is, it's actionable. You can do something about it, which is great.
Yeah, I had a good friend of mine who, very health conscious, lived in an apartment complex and started to have a lot of health issues in his like mid to late 40s, and, was always healthy. And he just attributed it exactly to what you're saying, to getting old. Mm-hmm. And he was like, my eyesight's getting worse. I'm having all these problems. I just can't stay healthy. And one of his neighbors had done one of these tests, and it came back with just a litany of issues. And he ended up having some life issues that took him out of that position. So, change in relationship and stuff, and ended up moving. And within probably 6 months, he was an absolutely different person, and he ended up talking to his neighbor that initiated a lot of the testing. And the guy said, like, we tried to fix it, and what they ended up doing was the whole apartment complex was having a severe mold issue, and everyone had to move out for like a week or two. Wow. And he's like, this is where at least some part of my issues were just building and building, and I would go and get treatment, and then I'd go home and I'd sleep in the, enemy's territory.
Yeah. Yeah. And actually, interestingly, mold is like the silent disease because you just think, oh, I have eczema, or I have asthma, or I'm anxious, or I can't concentrate. Well, 1 in every 2 buildings has had water damage. Think about that. 1 in every 2. So even if you're like, oh, my house never had any leaks, I have no water damage, but your school probably did, and your college, and your dorm room, and your work, maybe your car, if your car was flooded, there's mold. Like, there's mold everywhere. And so it is really pervasive.
Well, we're in South Louisiana. So, I mean, look at the storms that have come through, and the amount of, different issues every 5 to 10 years that has brought some of that. And you look at it and it's like, this is everywhere. On some level, you're right. Somewhere that you're going on a daily basis has had water damage in the last decade. Mm-hmm. Yeah. What's the remediation process inside your body look like? And I mean that kind of like in what do people start to do, but also what's happening in there? How do we actually start to get some of this out so our body's not having this inflammatory response to these toxins that are in there?
I love this question. Okay, first off, Derrick, I love this question. So first, think of it like you want to not fill up your body with toxins, with mold, mycotoxins. So you have to make sure that you're not being exposed ongoingly, right? So remediate whatever's in your environment, avoid it, don't go there. If you have a moldy car, get rid of it. Like, you can't do anything about that. So don't keep filling up the body with exposure. That's one. And then the question is, how do you get it out of you? So there's 2 parts to this. So I'm a huge fan of test, don't guess, because you have no idea what you're treating, right? You don't know. You just think, okay, well, I probably have mold because I lived in a moldy place, but you don't know what's in your body. And you don't know what was in your, what you got exposed to 20 years ago. So I'm a tremendous fan of find a senior level, comfortable with testing and treating toxins, functional medicine provider. It's a very qualified statement, right? But find someone who is comfortable testing you. And typically the test we use for mycotoxins is a urine test. There's two great ones on the market. One is Real-Time Labs. They're covered by Medicare. So if someone has Medicare, we automatically do that. And then there's Great Plains Labs, or Mosaic. They just changed their name, and they have a mycotoxins test. Both of them are urine tests. That's great, right? You just pee. Take a hot bath and pee. Then you're done. I do a sauna and then wait a little bit and pee. That's the test. So once you know what you're dealing with, in one hand, you can tailor the treatment. On the other, we have some treatments that will span all of the different issues. So there's a fiber derived from the konjac tuber called propylmanin, and it will bind all of the strains of mycotoxin. So if you're in a place where you can't get to testing, you can't get to a functional medicine provider, you don't have the resources, you can take this fiber. It's called Lean and Clean. It's on our site, and you can take it. It's easy, right? And that will bind to your mycotoxins. Treating mycotoxins is a marathon. It's not a sprint, okay? It's not like, oh, I'm going to take it for 3 weeks and then I'm done. Everyone who starts out with this treatment is gung-ho. They're like, I'll do treatment 3 times a day. I'm like, don't do it. You're going to get really tired of that. And we're talking years. I started treating in 2019 in May when I came back from that vacation in France that sent me off the cliff. I had already done the test before I went. And, I've been treating for 4 years. I've gone from 5 strains to 1. I'm actually due to retest. I just brought the kit home yesterday. And it takes a lot. So I've gone from 5 strains, I think I said 1, I meant 2. I've gone from 5 strains to 2 strains of mycotoxins in 4 years. Okay, it's a really long process, Derrick. So it's not like you're going to be better immediately. It's a slog.
Is mycotoxins also
Yes.
stored in fat cells? Is that where they're primarily stored in the body?
Mycotoxins can be stored throughout the body. It can be anywhere. So it typically will get stored away. It's very interesting. A lot of these toxins are very corrosive to the gut. So you might not think that you have a mycotoxins issue, but if you have gut dysfunction or irritable bowel, and you're like, I used to have irritable bowel even without gluten, cow's dairy, sugar, alcohol. I'm like, why do I still have irritability? And it's because these are irritating and corrosive to the gut. So it's stored throughout the body. So the binders, what you take are binders. The propylmanin fiber is a binder. It helps with metals. It helps with other toxins. It helps clear out the gut. But it really is just a binder. But it is a long slog, Derrick. Just to be clear, it's not like a weekend warrior. It's really start it and keep going. And 6 to 12 months later, you might go, oh, I really see the impact of this. Cool, right? But it takes a while.
I don't want to get us completely off, but we've looked at a lot of this. What's your thought on like doing intermittent, prolonged fasting sessions to help kind of get the body into that, kind of
hermetic stress, right?
Yep.
Some people do tolerate it very well. I'm reluctant to say 100% yes or 100% no, because not everyone will tolerate it, and some people will thrive with it. So if you're someone who really does thrive with it, that's good for the body, but you do ultimately have to break your fast. I'm actually less concerned with what you're doing during the fasting than I am with what are you refeeding with when you break your fast. I'm more concerned about that because we often see it like, well, if I'm so good most of the time, then I can be off the rails for the rest of it. But that's almost more harmful. So I would also focus on what are you refeeding with and how do you make sure that quality is high and you're eating the right food for you.
Yeah, I think that's probably a big challenge for a lot of people. We had a podcast come out not too long ago about the secrets of the blue zones, the little documentary that came out recently.
Yeah.
Have you seen that?
I haven't.
So really, really great documentary in terms of like going around and they're studying the blue zones around the world and like spending time with these people who are living to 100 quite healthy. Mm-hmm. And there's all kind of takeaways from it. I think it was a very well done thing. But one of the things you see is these people eat a lot of healthy, locally grown natural foods.
Yeah.
And, a lot of it in a lot of these areas, it's coming from their own gardens. It's coming from, these little small farms that are around them. And I think a lot of people, at least when we're talking to them, they're like, how do I make the best choice of what I'm feeding myself to limit my exposure to, one, just like natural foods that my body sees as toxins, but two, foods that have been altered in some way that my body won't recognize something and, have a toxic response to it. Do y'all, I mean, I know that's a tough question because some of it's access, but what's some of the easy things people can do for that? Is there any little tips you have for them?
Yeah, I'm really interested always in hacking your life, right? Like I have a patient with POTS, which postural orthostatic hypotension syndrome. So she's dizzy all the time, and I'm like, "Are you doing your Himalayan salts and your electrolytes?" She's like, "Oh, I keep forgetting." Okay, well, how about you either put it on your desk so when you get to work you see it, or you rubber band it to your water bottle, because she drinks 3 water bottles, the 24 ounces. She drinks 3 of those a day, and everyone should have electrolytes in it. I'm like, why don't you rubber band it to your water bottle so that every time you refill it, you're like, all right, I got to fill it. And she's like, oh, that's a great idea. I never thought of that. So I'm a huge fan of hacking your life, right? Do what you can do to make it easy on yourself, because we're all busy. Yeah. So what I say is, A, start with what you can do. What works in your budget, in your philosophy, in your access. Start there and do the best with what you have. So don't look at someone else's plate, what they're doing. Look at your plate. That's one. 2, if you live near an organic farm, there's things called CSAs, community supported agriculture, where you can buy essentially a farm share, and for like $25 a week, they'll give you a box of vegetables. And for most people, that's a good amount of vegetables every week, right? Like that, if you ate just your farm share and didn't eat anything else and ate everything they gave you, you'd be getting your vegetables. And aim for an organic or IPM, integrated pest management, which means they spray less. They still spray, but they spray less. And I'm a big fan of frozen, because it's frozen at the peak of freshness, and it's often less expensive than purchasing organic that's not local. It's been trucked from all over, but frozen is often more accessible. And then I am a huge fan of decreasing or eliminating alcohol. That's free. Super not popular, but it's free. You could do that. And then don't drink your calories, right? And don't drink your calories from a plastic water bottle, because you're getting a double whammy. You're getting the sugar and you're getting the endocrine disrupting hormones endocrine disrupting chemicals that mess with your hormones in a plastic water bottle. And it's bad for the earth, right? It never goes away. So like 10 bajillion generations later, they're going to go, oh, remember when my great granny drank that and threw it away. And our earth is the way it is. So, it just never goes away. And then I'm also a fan of minimizing the sugar, because for many of us, it's replacing the food we're eating, and it's throwing off the gut balance, which then throws off our digestion, which throws off our experience of life. So there's a lot of things you can do, but it's really about do what you can do that works for you. And don't look at anyone else's plate. Only look at your plate.
Yeah, that's a big place for a lot of people, because it's like, if you can't do it and sustain it, we're probably not going to stick with it long enough to see the kind of fruits of your labor.
Yeah, agreed.
It's funny you brought up POTS, because one of the questions we have is from a patient of mine who has gotten good results treating the nervous system and physical issues of her POTS. But I would say she still feels like there's something kind of lurking under the surface, where she's always worried she's going to deal with a flare-up. It's always there. And one thing we've talked about is the amount of that low level of constant stress is something that we need to work on so that she can kind of completely get there. But I also, I hear you say that. I also wonder if it's like she feels that low level, that it might be something that's kind of lurking under the surface, because intuitively her body knows that something's not right.
Sure.
So in those, go ahead.
Yeah, I would totally, I'm sorry for interrupting you. I would agree with that 100%. The body knows, right? The hardest part about being, I'll say female, I know there's men and women listening, but the patient I had before, I was like, she went to the doctor and was like, hey, should I be tested for this? Because you mentioned you thought I might have it. And he's like, you don't have that. I never mentioned that. So this experience of being gaslit, like if you feel like something's not right, something is not right. Trust your body. And so the questions I would have are, so there's two parts to this. I had this realization a couple months ago because I was like, hey, everything's going really well. What? And then I remember having this thought, what's going to happen? What's going to go wrong? And then I remember having the thought about the thought, like, how could you think like that? Like, why would you be such a Debbie Downer? And then I realized, like, whenever things are going well, we're always waiting for the other shoe to drop. And the nature of life, literally the nature of life is that sometimes good things happen and sometimes not so good things happen. And then sometimes good things happen. And it's really in an evolution, not evolution, it's in a cyclical process. And that's actually what it means to be alive. That it's sometimes you're up and sometimes you're down. And the goal is to be up more than down, obviously, and not to have repeated catastrophes. But bad things happen, and they're going to happen. So one thing I'll say is, whatever is your Achilles heel, it's going to flare. Because you're going to be sleepless or stressed or eat something or travel or drink alcohol or do something that'll set your body off, and you'll have a flare or a backslide. But you don't need to wait for it. I promise you it'll happen, right? But then the other part of it is, if you really genuinely feel like something's not right there, my next question would be, have you been tested for Lyme and all the co-infections? Because those can give you weird reactions. You probably have toxins, because if you live on this earth, you've got toxins. Congratulations, right? But it's an opportunity. And then, have we optimized your intake and your Himalayan salt and your electrolytes, and are you getting enough water, and do you need a blood pressure med, and are we optimizing you to make sure that you can stay upright when you need to be? And also, really weirdly enough, exercise helps people with POTS. So go figure. You would be like, I have POTS, I can't do that. But if you can get yourself to exercise as much as you can, it helps condition the heart so that you have fewer POTS episodes. Like, who would have thought? You kind of think, oh, I would do less exercise, but it's the other way around.
I love it. Yeah, and in that particular case, getting the symptoms in control to where she could exercise was one of the big game changers. It's like, what we've talked about is that this can almost become her superpower, because if she continues and she has more of a motivation to stay stricter than a lot of people to live a really healthy life, because when she doesn't, she's got a faster reminder than most people. Most people can ignore the toxins and the issues that they're, getting kind of into their body or in their environment, but she can't. And so, one person could think of that as a bad thing. Every time I eat gluten, every time I go in this type of environment, it flares me up. But we've talked a lot about, like, you get an alert faster than other people. So you can use that for good, quicker than someone else would be able to. So it's kind of just trying to reframe some of that stuff so that people are empowered to kind of take control of these situations.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, there's always an upside, right? Like, I don't really have a desire to eat gluten, but certainly it keeps me healthier not to eat it than if I sort of could eat it and sometimes could eat it. That uncertainty. I think the black and white of it, even though it can be stressful, like, oh, I failed or I wasn't perfect, but I never eat gluten because I feel so awful. So I think it is nice to have a pretty quick barometer to tell you when you're off the rails for yourself. I think it's valuable.
I feel like gluten falls into this category of it's very common that it's on people's list of kind of negative reaction. Yeah. At least, if you put a group of people, by and large, most of them will be healthier if they avoid gluten. Are there other things like that you've noticed over your years, kind of seeing more and more patients that you were like, what, if in doubt, avoid these things?
Sugar's the devil, man. It just is. And you're in Louisiana, so y'all have the devil down there, right? Like, you guys have the witchcraft, and sugar's the devil. You don't need beignets.
So beignets covered in giant globs of powdered sugar, not so good.
Everything, yeah, no, the beignet. I was in New Orleans a gosh, like 30 years ago and had beignets. They're amazing, but they're really bad for you. Okay, just to be clear, sugar's the devil. Because it's so pro-inflammatory. One, it's addictive, and so you get more of it. The RDA for sugar is 40 grams. A can of Coke has 39 grams. So if you drink a can of Coke and you live your life, you've basically surpassed the RDA for sugar just with a can of Coke. So and it's everywhere, and it's in everything, and it's addictive. We crave it. It messes up the gut microbiome. It then throws off our experience, and the incidence of obesity and diabetes and cardiovascular disease and autoimmune disease are exploding. So sugar would be my top. Gluten, because it's been so hybridized and grown to it, the growing of it and the way it's been bred has raised the gluten content. And then when you layer in that we're all, we're much more melting potted, and there's been intermarriages. So 40 to 50% of the population has a gene that makes them sensitive to gluten. So gluten I would agree with, and then sugar way up there, right? And then I would say alcohol, because it's a direct toxin. I mean, think of it, Derrick. If I said to you, Derrick, I have a glass of toxins for you. Okay, I get it. It's going to make your brain not work well. And you're going to make some bad decisions when you drink it. And you might feel crappy tomorrow, but would you like one or two? You'd be like, that chick's crazy.
Right.
But we drink alcohol. It's drinking a toxin. And by the way, it shuts down your detox when you drink it. So I would say alcohol is probably the third, because yes, the liver was designed to process it, but it wasn't designed to process the number and the breadth and the frequency of toxins that we're getting exposed to every minute, hour, day, week, month. Like, we're getting deluged. And so alcohol makes it even harder to deal with all the things we're being exposed to. And
down here, alcohol is probably the tough one for a lot of people, because it's so cultural. And when we look at it, I have this research in my book. For every ounce that you average of alcohol intake per day, your life expectancy goes down by a year. So basically you drink one 8-ounce beer a week, and your life expectancy drops by a year. And that's just like a single one, which, where, again, that's not what we do in Louisiana. We drink 10.
You drink the case. My doctor, one of my good friends, who's also my osteopath, he's Irish, and he said to me, when my brother got a brain tumor, the doctor told him to stop drinking alcohol. And so he cut out his whiskey. So I go over his house, my doctor goes over his brother's house, and his brother is drinking beer. And he says to me, I said to my brother, the doctor said that you're not supposed to be drinking beer. Any alcohol. He goes, beer's not alcohol. He goes, we're Irish. We think beer is just what you drink with dinner. And I was like, okay, well, I'm Jewish. We don't drink anything with dinner, really, unless, but it was shocking to me. Like, you have to really recognize, like, people don't really think about beer as alcohol, because it used to be mead and now it became beer. So I would say alcohol, whatever you can do to cut it down or eliminate it is going to be in your favor. No, you're never going to regret cutting it down.
Yeah, when I was in London in June for quite a few conferences, and one of the companies that was at one of them is this GABA Labs company that is making a molecule that would be used in place of alcohol, would be used in place of ethanol, that works on GABA receptors to help give you that similar, like, hey, I feel relaxed, I've got like a light little buzz, but I feel really good, and I'm not getting the negatives of ethanol intake. And actually, for a lot of people, there's a net elevation of health overall, because we are, improving, cellular health, nervous system health, by intaking this, as you said. I'm sure there's the dose makes the poison type of idea, but I would love for those things to become more of an option, because you're right. When we explain what alcohol does, it's like there's no way that we would rationally say yes to that, but it's so ingrained in our culture that we kind of need it as the social lubricant, and that means that we get to relax. That glass of wine at the end of the day, everybody, what do? They take a sip. And that stress relief is very important. but I wonder if we could just sub something out and our brain still gets that same release, but we're not putting a toxin into our body. But
Yeah, totally. I
so
would agree with that.
I've even tried to get this stuff over here. You can't get it here yet because the FDA is still saying like, no, we got to look at it further. I'm like, wait a second. We sell how much alcohol per day, and yet
Alcohol's legal, man.
right, we have to wait on this because we need more studies on it.
Well, alcohol's not a drug, right? I don't think the FDA is approving alcohol. So it's totally different. You know, if the FDA looked at alcohol, they would never approve it, but it's not a drug. It's just a food that's been fermented, technically.
What are some of the other things that people listening to this should start doing to improve their overall health, especially when it comes to like the toxin category? Are there some activities that are just really good? Top of mind for me is like, I've heard tons of anecdotal data on sauna, some of the things like that. What are some of the activities y'all have patients doing that are really helpful for these areas?
Sure. Let's look at this in a couple of different layers. So there's the foundations layer. So leveling up your food, your sleep. Most of us, especially Americans, are chronically underslept. So 7 hours in bed is not enough time in bed because you don't get 7 hours of sleep. Maybe you get 6 to 6.5 if you're optimized. That's not enough sleep for most of us because then when you really drill into it, maybe you're getting an hour of deep sleep. So you have an hour a day where your body is actually draining the toxins, and the rest of the time it's not. So when you hit deep sleep, your cells shrink, they separate, the highway between them gets bigger, you drain your toxins into the lymph and the lymphatic tissue. So more sleep, move your body, sweat. Nobody likes to sweat. People are like, I don't want to sweat and I don't want to be stinky. I'm like, well, I don't really need you to be stinky, but I need you to move your body and sweat so that because you can eliminate toxins through your sweat. That's like the number one way. That pee, poop, and sweat, that's how you get it out of you. So move your body. Don't be a stress ball because that shuts down detox, that shuts down digestion, that messes up the whole system. These are foundational, right? Don't engage in relationships that are toxic to you. And know what your purpose is in life. That's foundation. And then, okay, what can you do that's on top of that? If you're leveling up your food, aim for organic and local wherever possible. Epsom salt soaks, either just your feet or your whole body, very helpful. Saunas, near, mid, far infrared is best in class, but go for, if it's just a heat sauna or like a Finnish sauna, cool. Go for that. Anything is better than nothing. Hyperbaric oxygen, acupuncture, anything that's getting the system functioning and moving in a more effective way, I highly recommend. Dry brushing, that's super, easy, low-hanging fruit because what you're doing is you're opening, it's sort of a boar's head, stiff bristle brush, and it's opening up the capillaries so that you can bring toxins to the skin and get them out. And then the next level of that is, that's kind of ongoing. What do you do for life? But then the next question is, if you have any symptoms or any autoimmune chronic disease, diabetes, any of the things I listed earlier in the podcast, then you may want to consider having a consult with a functional medicine doc who's senior, who can do the testing and tell you what should you focus your energies on. Because, you don't want to waste your time, your energy, or your money. But I would say try to focus it. And one more thing I would say in terms of things you can do on your own, 1 out of every 6 deaths, according to a 1989 study in Massachusetts, indicated that they tracked back to either poor air or poor water quality. So to the best of your budget, filter your water and filter your air, whether that means a room or countertop filter or whether that means a whole house air water filter. Whatever you can do to the best of your financial ability.
That is a fantastic list. Y'all are going to want to go back and listen to that one again. We recently added a room air filtration system, and our deep sleep, we use an Oura ring to track sleep. Our deep sleep went up like 10 to 15% on average. Wow. Just from making that one change. I was like, how much is that? Your body's dealing with this. So it's like, I can't dip into this deep sleep because I've got these things going on right now. Mm-hmm. I had a couple questions on that came in on supplements for this. You mentioned some of the binders. Are there other supplements that people who have dealt with toxins, people who have dealt with these issues, that you recommend and find quite helpful? I know that kind of is independent depending on what the person's dealing with, but what things do y'all tend to go back to a lot?
Yeah, honestly, Derek, what's really cool is that so there's three categories of toxins: the heavy metals, the mycotoxins, and then what I'll call other. That's all the environmental stuff that's not metals or mycotoxins. That's the flame retardants, the plastics, the styrenes, the nail polish, blah blah blah. So the metals treatment and the mycotoxins treatment tend to take the longest, although you're always exposed to toxins, so it's an ongoing game. But what's really nice is that what you're working on in toxins is optimizing the liver's ability and the gut, the liver and the gut's ability to get rid of these toxins. And so what that means is the thing that optimizes the liver that helps with heavy metals also helps with those environmental toxins. There's a lot of overlap and synergy with things. So I'm a huge fan of test, don't guess. So don't do a treatment for heavy metals without knowing that you have heavy metals, because the treatment, well, first of all, the doctor needs to prescribe the pills, but second of all, the treatment pulls out minerals and nutrients. And so you don't want to do that if you don't need to, right? Only do it if you have to. If you believe you got a mold exposure, you can do that propylman konjac fiber. But if you're like, oh, I want to do more, you can do activated charcoal. Don't take it with food or other supplements or medications, because it's a very powerful binder and it will bind those things. So then you're effectively not taking them. Charcoal, similar. Chlorella is not an indiscriminate binder, so it really does focus more on heavy metals and mycotoxins. And I'm a huge fan of eating your food to detox, right? So you need the B vitamins, you need cilantro or parsley. You can do the things that the hot foods. Those tend to be very supportive of detox in terms of the micronutrients that the liver needs. So there's a ton of things that support phase 1 and phase 2 in the liver. That's how your liver processes the fat-soluble toxins. So to deal with the metals, the mycotoxins, and the other, you can do things like N-acetylcysteine. That supports production of glutathione. And so you're giving your body the precursors it needs. You can take glutathione itself. You can take liposomal vitamin C. B vitamins, always make sure they're activated. Why? Because if you're one of those people who has the MTHFR mutation, you don't take your inactive B and make it active, and then it's useless if it's inactive. So make sure you activate your B vitamins by taking activated ones. That's an easy, low-hanging fruit. And then don't stress, because when you stress, you shut down detox and you shut down digestion. So make sure your adrenals are well cared for, either by meditating, getting enough rest, proper exercise, or taking adaptogens to support the adrenals. So there's a lot you can do. But again, there's a point at which if you're not, feel freaking amazing when you do it, you need sort of outside intervention.
Yeah. I think making sure that it passes the test of am I, of course it takes time, but am I feeling better? Am I going in the right direction? Is my human experience getting better? Totally. Wendie, this has been incredible. That is a lot of knowledge bombs in a very condensed period of time. Thank you so much. Where can people find a little more about all of your information? Where can they find out more about you and y'all's practice?
Sure. I have a gift for people too. You made it this long. You should get a
my listeners love gifts.
I love gifts. Who doesn't? I like them to be sparkly, in all honesty, but I love gifts too. So the gift, just so people, we can get to the good stuff, drwendie.com/gift. And it's not doctor spelled out. It's just Wendie, WENDIE.com/gift. And that is chapter 1 of the book. So you can see if we resonate together. A quiz, you can see how toxic you are, and a non-toxic guide to healthy living, so that you can actually start to clean up your house, clean up your life, clean up your beauty products. Well, Derek, I saw you. You're beautiful, but it doesn't look like you wear a lot of products. So clean up all the products in your life. And so that's the online brand. We have an online brand at drwendie.com, which is for people who are anywhere in the world who want to be in the game. We have programs, we have supplements, we have courses, we have testing that you can do to look at what are your toxins. And that's a wellness program. So it's all wellness. And then we have a bricks and mortar for people who are like, okay, I'm ready. I want to deal with this and I want expert guidance because we're senior level functional medicine providers. So that's our bricks and mortar in Massachusetts. And that's 5journeys.com. And we take insurance, but it's a membership model. So you have to belong to the practice.
Gotcha. Love it. And you've already answered this question quite a few times, but I'm going to make you kind of put the singular at the end here. We ask all of our guests, if people listening to this could do one thing to improve their health today, what would that be?
Level up your food. Food is medicine. You do it every day, multiple times a day. So do your best to have it be local, organic, minimally processed, low sugar, look like its natural state in life, and contain fat and carb and protein so that your body gets what it needs. That
is so fantastic. Wendie, thank you so much for everything you do and all the positivity and information that you're putting out into the world. I know that y'all are changing a lot of lives with the information that you're putting out. So we really appreciate having you on and people like you existing and helping those people. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on, and right back at you.
All right, my dear. And everybody, you can find all of that stuff in the show notes. As always, thank you for listening. We'll see y'all next week.